Hi, I'm Teresa and welcome to my channel and welcome to my June wrap up, my Pride Month wrap up. So in June I did only read queer books and it was a great time. I read so many books. I didn't read so many books. I read so many great books and I actually had a new favourite which I can't wait to talk about and try and convince you all to read because it's so good. So when I said I didn't read many books, I mean I read 6 books. It's not horrific, but I was hoping to read more, but I hit a bit of a slump midway through the month. I was just busy because I came home from Spain, and yeah. But I also read a lot of fantasy, a lot of big books, so I think that also was part of the problem, and because I usually read contemporary, they're usually shorter and I fly through them, and some of these took a while to read. But anyway, without further ado, let's start on the books. So first up we have got Mistrial by Heather Walter. This is the sequel to Malice, which I read last year and just absolutely adored. So I was really anticipating reading the sequel and it did not disappoint. This is the second book in the duology, so it's now complete. I encourage you to go read it. And this is a Dark Sleeping Beauty retelling. It's an adult fantasy book and it follows Alice, who is the wicked witch who curses Aurora. And it's in a society where there's partly magical beings who are basically exploited by the royal family, and they all have this lovely light magic, but Alice has darker magic. And because of this darker magic, Alice is very much vilified, and we follow her as she eventually meets Aurora and begins to fall in love with her. But she's also dealing with all these preconceptions of her and her magic because of just the type of power that she has, and dealing with these expectations and being pushed in a certain way and basically being pushed into villainy. And it's just a really interesting look at what it takes for someone to snap and to become a villain from this kind of already morally grey character but who's trying so hard to do the right thing. And it was just really an interesting character study in Malice, as well as a lovely sapphic romance. I adored the romance. And then in this book, it takes place, I think, 100 years after the first one, and the first one ended very explosively, so I was kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I liked how this one gave things time to settle and then carried on with the story. And it was just, again, really interesting look at characters. I think the characters are done so well in this book. The romance, I had some qualms about during this book. I was kind of like, not feeling it, but it resolved in a way that I really liked and really appreciated. So I was really chuffed with that, and I just thought the overall resolution of the book and the resolution of everyone's character arcs was just so well done. I just really liked this duology. There was a couple moments where I was like, what? I'm not quite sure about this, but it pulled through and it was all for the better and it worked out. I would say that this one, I'd say it's actually better written than the first. The first one was very dense. There's a lot of information thrown at you. And this one, it's the information, it's kind of in the text a lot more naturally, and it just makes it a lot easier to read and to digest, which I really appreciated. I think it's a bit overlong. The second part is ginormous, and I didn't really know where the plot was going or if there was a plot until the end of the second part, which is about 3/4 of the way through. So, as I say, there were some moments I was wondering where this was going and if I would actually like it, but it pulled through. I just think it needed to be a bit better edited, maybe? Shorter, condensed, clearer plot arc from the beginning. But overall, did very much enjoy this. Thought it was a brilliant finale, and I would encourage you to read this duology. Next up we have got Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn. I have been looking forward to reading this book since it came out in 2020, and I've finally picked it up. It's only taken 2 years, but the third book's out, so now I don't even have to wait for the sequels to release. It's kind of worked out. But I want to show you, it's signed. I won this in a giveaway from Kat when this paperback released, which would have been last year, so this has been on my shelf for a while, but finally picked it up. Very happy I have. I really enjoyed this book. Really looking forward to continuing the series. So this takes place during the French Revolution, and you follow this group of teenagers who have been working to kind of free people who are wrongfully imprisoned or wrongfully headed for the guillotine. And one day they are hired to rescue this girl, Olympe, and when they find her in her prison cell, she is not what they imagined and not what they were told to expect. And they discover that she has this ability to manipulate lightning, like electricity. And this kind of sets off this whole turn of events because the people that hired her want her, the other side want her, the royalists and the revolutionaries, and they get caught right in the middle of this. And they're also dealing with, well, the girl doesn't want to go with any of them because she'll be treated horribly. So should we just rescue her and make an enemy of everyone? Like, it's really, really good. This is queer. I think all four of our team are queer. At least three. And our two main characters are both sapphic, and they're in a relationship at the beginning of this book. And I just really, really enjoy this. Like, I just had a brilliant time. You know me, I like French stuff because I study French. I like French history. I think it's interesting. So I really enjoyed this setting. And it was just a really good start to the series. I'm so invested in this world and these characters. I'm prepared for the rest of the trilogy to get a bit painful because there's some stuff I have seen. But it's going to be worth it. I hope. But yes, I am so excited to continue this series. It's actually in my summer TBR when I put that video up last. So yes, I'm very, very excited about this series. I recommend it already. Can't wait to continue it. Next up, I read The Atlas 6 by Olive Blake. This is an adult contemporary fantasy book kind of thing. It's dark academia. It's kind of taken the world by storm. It was originally self-published but grew so big and so popular in book talk that it was actually sold on a book deal to a major publisher. And I can see why. It was really good. I really liked it. I did find it a bit of a slow read in that it took me time to read it because I had to focus and just the style of the writing and everything. But that's not a point against it. It's just something different for me when I like reading easy to read, fast-paced books where I don't have to think too much. So yeah, that was interesting and I enjoyed that. I don't know how to describe this book. But you follow multiple point of views. There are 6 of them, the Atlas 6, and they are all very, very brilliant, talented magicians, basically. Like, actual magic, not performance magic. And they are all recruited by this very mysterious society, the Alexandrian Society, which have links to the Library of Alexandria, and they're aiming to preserve that knowledge and, you know, study more and everything. Very studious. It sounds like it's going to be a great opportunity. And the 6 arrive and they're learning all this stuff and they're not really getting along. There's lots of fun character dynamics there. They're all so different and from so many different walks of life. And then they discover that only 5 will walk out. Only 5 will survive this. And it gets a bit more intense. And I actually just really enjoyed it. I love character work. And I thought it was done so well here. I was really rooting for almost all of them. There's just one guy I didn't like at all. And it's just fun. I don't know. I just had a great time. I'm excited to read the sequel and see what happens next. So I think it's queer. There's a couple of characters who I'd say are queer, or there's some things they've said that have made me think, oh yeah, okay. But it's not explicit, so make that what you will. I don't think that's a fault against the book or anything like that, just to be clear, but I know some people like very, very explicit queer rep, so there you go. Anyway, it was good. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading the sequel. There we go. Next up, we have got my new favourite, and that is If You Still Recognise Me by Cynthia So. This took me by surprise. Oh my god. It was so gorgeous. I read over 80% of this just in one sitting in one day. And it was my last day in Spain, and I had to be up at 3 o'clock the next morning to get my flight. I was very much considering staying up to read it and giving myself even less time to sleep. But I didn't. I'm like, I'll just read it in the airport in the morning or on the plane. And then I didn't do that because I'm like, I'm too tired. I want to savor this, be in the best possible position to read this and get a full emotional impact. So then it took like 2 more days to finish the book. But it was worth it. It was lovely. I had such a good time reading this. Honestly, I really, really encourage you to read this. So this is a YA contemporary and it's actually set in Oxford in England, and I like that. I like books that aren't set in the US because I feel like so many are. I just like something a bit different sometimes. But yes, this follows Elsie, and she's had this crush on her internet best friend Ada for ages and ages and ages. And she's kind of like gearing up to tell Ada about her feelings and everything. But then Joan, her childhood best friend, walks back into her life and things get a bit hectic. And when Ada mentions that her grandmother used to live in the UK and she used to have what they believe was a romantic relationship with another woman, but they lost contact, Elsie decides as her grand gesture to Ada to show how much she cares for her, she's going to track down this missing woman and reunite the grandmothers, and it's going to be great. And they go on this adventure and Joan helps her out, and it's just so lovely. I had the greatest time. I love the characters. Elsie is Chinese British. Both her parents are from Hong Kong, as is Joan's family, and Joan was actually living in Hong Kong, and so I really liked the kind of discussions of being Chinese and family and everything that goes into this book and these characters and just the relationships they have with each other. I liked Joan, and Joan is a lesbian. She has a very different experience of being a lesbian because she grew up mostly in Hong Kong, and I just really enjoyed that. I loved it so much. I love this book. It's just so soft and sweet, and I've seen so many people say it's like the falling in love montage and Heartstopper, but sapphic. And like, that is my perfect book. Like, we know this is my favorite book of all time. I adore Heartstopper and I adore this. So please read this. It is just fantastic. I love it so much. Oh, and also fandom. That's how Elsie and Ada are friends. I just love the conversations about fandom, and it's just so feel good. I love it. Next up we have got A Cruel and Fated Light by Ashley Shuttleworth, which is the sequel to A Dark and Hollow Star. This is one of my favourites of last year, and I loved it so much, and I was so excited to read the sequel, and I loved the sequel. So A Dark and Hollow Star is a YA urban fantasy, and it follows 4 queer teens who each kind of get caught up in these ritualistic murders happening in their community. They don't know each other at this point, but they're all part of the Fae courts, and when Ironborns, these part human, part Fae people, start being ritualistically murdered, they seem to be the only ones that care, so they all start working like individually to solve these murders and get to the bottom of it, but then they stumble across each other, team up, it's wonderful, and that's it. It's just a fantastic book. I love it so much. It's very reminiscent of City of Bones, but very, very queer, and I love it. And like some Cruel Prince vibes, I think. I've not read The Cruel Prince. Sometime soon I think I will. But I get that vibe. But yes, it was just fantastic. I loved it so much. I love the characters. They're just... I love them. So I was so excited to be like reunited with them in this book. You also get another point of view. You get Celadon's point of view, in case anyone's read it. I love him. I loved his story in this book as well. And it was just, this book was so good. I love being back in these characters' heads, back in this world. There's lots of scheming and machinations going on. You don't know who to trust, and I love that in a fantasy. I love very political ones where you don't know who to trust, especially like with fairies who can't lie but are also very deceptive. It's so interesting, and you're learning more about the things that were uncovered in the first book about different magic systems and such, and I just really, really loved my time reading this. I had such a good time. And then the end happened and it hurt me a lot, but it was worth it because everything else was so good. I love the world building in this series. A lot of people find the first one a bit too heavy on the world building, difficult to read, but I personally loved it. I thought it was very well written to be easy to digest. It was interesting, and I get the impression that Ashley Shuttleworth has notebooks upon notebooks of just world building and how everything works. I would love to read them, and I think they do a really good job of just like dropping little bits in, and you learn more and more about this world, and it's just so interesting. So I had a brilliant time. I love these characters. I love some certain character developments, romantic plot lines. I was having a brilliant time. Definitely recommend you pick up the series. This is a second book, and I believe what's going to be a quartet. And I just love it so much. The final book I read in June was Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I read this in like a single sitting. I had a brilliant time. This is my last Alice Oseman book I had to read. Like, I'm finished. I read them all now. This is not a new favourite. I kind of saved it for last because I anticipated it being possibly a new favourite. But it wasn't. I still loved it. But I think I prefer Loveless and I Was Born for This. I think that would be my top two from the prose novels. I don't know where Heartstopper fits in, but anyway, this was brilliant, wonderful. I had a great time reading it. The synopsis, I feel, doesn't do it justice, because I read this and I was like, okay, it sounds kind of basic, but when you get into it, there's so much to the story, and I love it. So this follows Frances, who is a study machine. That is her, like, life's purpose is to study so she can get into Cambridge, get a good job, live a happy life. That is her plan. Secretly, she draws fan art for this podcast she loves on YouTube called University. And when she comes across Aled Last, a boy from her town who she's never really spoken to before, though she was best friends with his sister, who mysteriously went missing, he gets a bit drunk. She discovers that he is the host of this podcast. And the two begin to become friends, and they spend all their time together. They just get so close so quickly, and I love their friendship so much. But then that trust is broken, and Frances has to confront what actually happened with Alad's sister, and it's just like a really, really wonderful book about finding yourself and kind of choosing what you want and finding what you really, really want. And just friendship and fandom as well. There's a few fandom books in this pile. I like it. And it's just a really, really great time. As with all of Alice's other books, there is a focus on mental health. And just, I love this book. It was such a good time reading it. I flew through it. Alice's writing is so easy to read. Just her narrative style, it's incredible. I just fly through anything she writes. And I just had a brilliant time reading this. So yes, that is what I read in June. I had a great time. They were all 4 or 5 star reads, so like, come on, it's such a good reading month. I really loved it. I'm definitely on a contemporary and a romance kick now. That was a lot of fantasy, and I think it's fried my brain a little bit. It's like 2 days into July, sorry, and I've already read 2 romances. But yeah, I really enjoyed these books. I hope you pick up these books. I will have Goodreads links to them as always. I will have reviews for Cruel and Fated Blight, If You Still Recognize Me, and The Atlas 6 at some point. I've not currently written them. I've been putting it off. But they will be up at some point, so keep an eye on my Goodreads for that. You can find a link to that as well as my other social media in the description if you want to keep up with me. And yes, if you've liked this video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, like what did you read in June? Have you read any of these? Do you want to? Let me know. And yes, just thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in another video soon.